Welcome to 06880, the podcast. Robin Tauck is a third-generation member of a family that is a pioneer in the travel industry. Her grandfather founded Tauck Tours 95 years ago. The company evolved from providing motor tours of New England to a worldwide business that includes river cruises, heli skiing, and a lot more. It's one of the most customer-centered companies anywhere, and now it's leading the way as travel evolves again. Robin is involved nationally and internationally in travel, tourism, historic preservation, and environmental issues. A longtime Westporter, she cares about those issues in our town too. So today we're going to talk about the intersection of travel and Westport. So Robin, Tauck has a lot of history. Give us the quick history of Tauck Tours.
Oh, well, thank you, Dan, and thanks for having me at 06880. Tauck has been based in Westport for a long time, or in the environs here, and the company started, as you said, by my grandfather back in 1925. He was from an immigrant family, like many American families. We were German-based. I was actually born in Germany, but they immigrated here in the late 1880s, and he was born in 1899 in New York City, a young German immigrant. And he got started, as many do, in whatever job he could find. And he landed a job in a bank, and not as a teller, but really as a young man running the coins from the tellers down to the big vaults that they used to have in New York City. He was just 21, 22 years old. And that was his job at that time. They didn't have coin trays. So at the end of the day, the rolls of the quarters, nickels, and dimes would be wrapped up and taken down to the vaults. And he had a mishap one time. And unfortunately, and every Tauck traveler knows this story, the young man spilled all of his coins. It was a disaster for the bank. They were not able to recoup a lot of the monies, and he was fired from his job. And they lived in New Jersey at that time, and he went and manufactured and figured out a design which is still used today for an aluminum coin tray. And Tauck was actually in the banking coin tray business up until the 1950s. The young man, Arthur Tauck, he got his job back at the bank, which was great. He sold the coin trays to the bank president, and soon he sold them around New York City and ventured off in New England in his Studebaker to enjoy the sights of New England and, frankly, take his banking materials, certainly to Boston and also throughout New England. And he loved the countryside of New England, particularly in the fall of the year. And he got this idea, this concept of bringing people with him. He was a consummate salesman. He missed the people interaction. He loved connections. And as you'll see in every Tauck brochure today, the original 4 guests that accompanied him from Newark, New Jersey on his 7-day trip to New England, $69, was in the fall. Actually, it was in July of 1925. And it is the first tour that we know of in America. And years later, my grandfather got license number 1 for touring in the United States.
They really created a whole industry. And how did they end up in Westport? What's the Westport connection?
And so my grandfather had 4 children, and they all lived in the New Jersey area. The company was based then, and even in my childhood, the company was based at 475 Fifth Avenue, beautiful location right across from the New York Public Library. So my brothers and I remember as kids going in there and seeing the operation and the guests coming in to buy their trips and travel to Washington, D.C. or around New England, Eastern Canada. He really opened Eastern Canada to tourism, so virtually the whole Eastern United States. And as the years went on, they, of course, had some really serious downturns. And this will happen in cycles in business when you're in business 90, 95 years. The worst being the Depression in the 1930s, and also World War II, which was the first time the company needed really to close for, at that time, 4 to 5 years. Today, in 2020, will be the second time in the company's history where we've ceased operations. But the company did start up again in the late 1940s and into the 50s. And at that time, travel agents had come into being, really in the 30s and 40s. And more travel was booked not by your guests walking into your office in New York City, but more over the phone lines, the 800 numbers. And my father was raising his family, his young family here in Westport, Connecticut. And like so many men, he was a commuter to New York City, and he passed by through on his way to the train station from southern Wilton, every day, even on Saturdays and Sundays when he would see the tours off at the Waldorf Astoria. And it was sitting at the traffic light at the corner of the Post Road and Westport Road that he looked over and saw this building that was part of the famous photographer's school right by the current National Hall. And he got an idea of moving his business here to Connecticut to be closer to this, where his family was living in the schools. And our first employees were the original 10 or 12 people who were working in the office in New York City. And we've never looked back. We've been here in Fairfield County ever since, in Westport for many years, and also in Norwalk, and currently in Wilton on Westport Road.
It is a great company and with a great reputation, and over the years, the company has gotten into things like historic preservation and that sort of thing. I know that's really important to you. Can you talk about what you do now with the company and those roles?
Well, the Tauck family has grown. I'm part of the third generation. We call ourselves Gen 3. As I said, my grandfather started the company. My father had a 50-year career, starting as a tour director. And Chuck and Peter and I, and now my two sisters, Liz and Kiki, have also been very involved in the business. Some of us have developed through management roles, starting, as many of us did, in the mailroom or in the reservation sales center, or many as tour directors out on the road. And we developed through leadership ranks in the company. And then as the company grew and we brought in, expertise from around the country and around the world, certainly here in our Fairfield County, we evolved to become more of a governing family and take governance roles, and that would be on our board of directors or as family owners, and overseeing what's important to us as a family and what's important to our guests and how we would like to see this business evolve. We have 16 in our next generation, and what's exciting right now, what's really exciting for our generation, is to see us work together with the next generation, ages 15 to 35, 38, in really recreating travel of the future. So we're still involved. We're working really hard, particularly through this pandemic, and seeing how we will safely emerge from these difficult times for the travel and hospitality industry, and how travel will, evolve in new and different ways. In terms of heritage preservation and caring for the people and places that we visit and that we see around our country and around the world, that's always been at the heart of our DNA. I think that was embedded perhaps in my grandfather's time, certainly from my mom and dad, who were of course Westport residents. In that we were always encouraged to get back to not only the places, but the cultures of the places where we visited. So we have a long history in that, starting with New England, and certainly a lot of preservation work in our national parks throughout this country. And we believe you give it home first in your local community, your national community, and now, of course, we're doing giving around the world.
Can you give some examples of how you give back to, like, say, the national parks?
Sure. Well, let's see. One of the first places that we felt was a great fit for Tauck happened to be one of the sites that have probably had more visitors than anywhere else, both from the tourism industry and the school systems, and that's the Old North Church in Boston. My goodness, we started as a New England tour operator way back when, and still are today. And we probably brought more people to the Old North Church than any other entity. So we helped the city of Boston to restore that church and to bring educational opportunities in there to understand the history, for example, of the African Americans who were such a part of the American Revolution and were part of the Boston community and that church. We restored the steeple of that church that was to be a community effort, and we very quietly offered one day. I remember the day in the 1970s, right over on where we were on Wilton Road in Westport, when we told the minister of the church that our company would handle the restoration of the steeple. It was very quiet. We didn't always put our name out there, but for example, we had done that. And then another significant time coming into the millennium under our then Presidents Clinton and subsequently President Bush, there was an outcry, I'm sure you remember, for volunteerism, asking every American to volunteer in their neighborhoods and in the national parks. And we took on, through the Tauck Family Foundation, an opportunity to provide a 5-year grant to the National Park Foundation in Washington, D.C., to ensure that every one of our national parks would have a volunteer program, that perhaps Americans would step out and do that. And we felt, in order to walk the talk, as they say, that perhaps we should start volunteer programs while our guests were on tour in our national parks. And there's well over 420 national parks now, I think, and Yellowstone, of course, is our biggest and the number one national park. And so we have 2 primary tours that go through that area. And I believe it was in the millennium or shortly thereafter that we started a volunteer program under World of Giving, wherein we offered every customer who went through there, every guest, the opportunity to restore some of the park trails, some of the significant buildings, some of the photographers' studios that were decrepit. And, there is a maintenance shortfall in our national park system. And President George Bush was so impressed with this that we would actually charge our customers up to $500-$600 a day and then have them work for our national parks, that we won the Presidential Preservation Award in the year 2006, I think it was. And we were invited to the White House for that award. So we had about 10 or 12 years of thousands of people, really, grandmothers and grandchildren and people volunteering in both Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks. Currently, Dan Mahar, who's a family CEO of the company, has a Hammer Corps program working that's also part throughout the parks in the U.S. So many of our employees and some of our guests and suppliers have joined us in these efforts.
So what's the future of travel? I mean, it's... the pandemic obviously just brought it to a screeching halt. And as travel begins again, cruises and tours and all that, what's it going to look like? Is it going to be the same? Is it?
Well, Dan, I wish I had the crystal ball. We all do. We're working through a very unusual and unprecedented time in the travel and tourism industry globally. Tauck has 150 itineraries in 75 countries, all 7 continents. So to answer what it'll be like in the future, I can tell you what's happening now and what's changing now. And this is a day-to-day, week-by-week situation. So I can't really predict what it'll be in the future, but it is the fastest growing industry in the world. I don't think many people realize that tour and travel accounts for almost 10.5% of global GDP, and that 1 out of 10 people worldwide work in hospitality. So you're talking restaurants, taxi drivers, guides, destinations, hotels. When travel comes to a screeching halt, the economic recovery, independence of many countries is, super escalated. And that's what's been happening. Even the G20 nations right now are noticing the importance of opening borders and the importance of travel and tourism for so many countries' economic dependence. And that's good for the industry. And we see that in really all sectors of population, from young kids who are traveling more than we ever did, right, as teenagers and college kids, and all the way up to the senior populations living longer, living healthier. So it's going to be on a significant upswing. We are We are a fairly vaccinated, affluent nation here in the United States, and 97% of our customers are now fully vaccinated and they're ready to travel. So 2022 is up 40%, at least for Tauck, and I think for our tourism sector as well. Cruise lines, riverboating in Europe, we're seeing a huge pent-up demand. How it will look different, I think you're going to be seeing smaller groups out there, more compassion and effort put towards sustainable travel, responsible travel, not as much a focus on the large groups, partly because of the pandemic. So many places are insisting that the visitation come in smaller numbers, smaller groups, regulating the groups. And this is going to be good for the environment, good for the other cultures, and create a different type of travel, I think, where we hope that we won't see some of the negative effects of over-tourism that was happening in certain parts of the world.
Really interesting. And you talked about the economic effect of travel, but it's also there's an effect when people go outside their comfort zone or what's familiar, when they interact with other people, when they look at different ways of doing things and different customs and foods. And I mean, travel is not just economic, it's almost spiritual, right?
Well, I also think, to me, the importance of community, culture, and connectedness is an ability to respect other people's way of life, learning, education that you could never get in your school systems. It's experiencing the vast array of differences around this world. And I do believe that it absolutely builds peace and understanding. And at the core, travel is truly a force for good in the world. And I think as Americans traveling, and of course we represent many countries at Tauck in our customer base, but as Americans traveling, we are in general a very sensitive and generous society, and people care about other places that they're seeing, learning about different ways of life. And I think travel, as people begin to get out and travel again, myself included, in 2021 and 2022, there's going to be a heightened sensitivities. There's going to be a heightened care for the world that fits, like a glove with this concern for social justice in the world too. I think it's going to be one of the most fascinating times to be out in the world and to be sharing and to feel the importance of balance, if you will, in the understanding of what we're all facing.
Community and balance. You've sort of balanced your life between travel and living in Westport. And you spent a lot of time on Saugatuck Shores, and now you're an Old Mill person. You've got a house right near Elvira's. You've got a house on Campo Cove. What does that mean? What does that area mean to you? Why do you hang out there?
I thought you might ask me that question. I've been asked many times in the travel industry, so why do you live in Westport, Connecticut? Of all the places you could live in the world or that you've traveled to, and I have been blessed to travel to some 90 countries, and I do always come back here. I grew up in Wilton. I was originally here in Westport after my parents came back from Germany, so my earliest memories of nursery school here, I think it was up on Long Lots Road. And then we moved to Wilton, southern Wilton, where I went through the school system and Wilton High School. And my first travel experience was to Mexico, where I spent most of my senior year, which was really challenging for me to be speaking a Spanish language, to be with a number of kids who weren't from my own high school. This was back in the 70s. I mean, people didn't really leave for that extended amount of time at 16, 17 years old. And I think through the travel experiences that I've had, even from a young age, I really appreciated what we have here in Connecticut. I was brought up sailing at Cedar Point Yacht Club when Cedar Point Yacht Club was just starting. My father was a sailor. I eventually, as you know, Dan, I moved to San Francisco in my college years, after my college years, and at 23, 24 years old, built a boat and sailed many, many places for a full year, sailed about 9,000 miles. And through that experience of mostly knocking around in small boats here off the Westport shoreline down to Larchmont, Cedar Point's a great racing community. I really love the waterfront communities here in our Connecticut coastlines. We don't realize what a beautiful coastline we really have and how valuable this Long Island Sound estuary really is, and how beautiful the shorelines of really Long Island and Connecticut are with our beautiful rivers. And I think what drew me over to the Old Mill area was my opportunity to live on Campo Cove. It's such an isolated little community of 22 homes out there, no vehicular traffic. And I owned a couple of properties out on the point there, and it was truly like living a world away. And I believe the whole area by the Sherwood Mill Pond and where we live close together in Campo Beach and in Old Mill Beach area, it's a great community. We all live so close to each other, and we have that sense of community in probably one of the most beautiful natural settings of Westport. So I'm very happy there.
Wow. Are you worried about any environmental issues or any other issues out there?
Well, I'm a member now of the Sherwood Mill Pond Committee, which is under Jim Marpy's tutelage, and Alicia Mosion of the Conservation Department leads that. So I think I've been on that committee for 5 or 6 years now, and doing our part to understand the cleanliness of the Sherwood Mill Pond and the impact of the environmental changes that are coming onto our shoreline. Absolutely, climate change is hitting us as it is every other community. I've had the opportunity to see even the source of this up in Greenland and to really study what's happening with global warming as best I can, and understand both locally and also in our travel business what this is going to mean for many of the places that we visit around the world, because we are obviously in the midst of that now. So what worries me most out there is, the environmental laws of our shoreline communities as the waters are rising, and I feel that impact every day there, and so do my neighbors. And so I've become somewhat of an expert in learning about erosion and the new living shorelines that are now being discovered as the way to protect our shorelines and allow the movement of tidal waters, and many of the laws that are required by FEMA now since, Hurricane Irene and Superstorm Sandy. It's coming. It's still coming, and wow, we are going to face this along our shoreline for sure.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by the fact that, you travel the world and you keep coming back to Westport. Is there a feeling, what kind of feeling do you have when you're back here as opposed to when you're traveling?
Well, I was back here a lot in 2020, that's for sure. I don't think I've ever stayed in Westport as long as I did in the year 2020, along with all my family for the most part. 9 or 10 of us live here, and the family is more 25, 30 people now, living in other states as well. I think that for all of us, Dan, yourself included, you're home when you're here. And while I go in and out of New York City quite a lot, and I'm between Boston and Washington and New York a bit, it's a really wonderful community here. We have so much arts and culture. We have so many great facilities to be involved in and to be active in. Our Y is state of the art. I've been involved in that for many years. And I find the influx of people here exciting, especially in these recent COVID years. There's a lot of new blood coming into the community. The kids are great. The kids are awesome. And it's a sense of peace and gentleness, actually, that I feel here in Westport. Oh. I don't know that everybody would say that, but I find it very comforting.
Awesome. So here's the last question. Two-part question. Of these 90-some countries that you've been to, first question, what's your favorite destination? And the second part is, of all the tours that Tauck runs, if you could only take one, which would it be?
Dan, we're asked that so many times.
I thought it was an original
and
question.
It's a very difficult question to answer. I've been so blessed and enriched to travel to so many places that sometimes it's the place that you return to again and again that you realize might be your favorite of all. In terms of a singular destination and one that is so moving and so enriching, and I hope that every one of our clients or our community are able to go, is truly life-changing and transformational, is the opportunity to go, in my view, to Egypt. I think Egypt, really to combine Egypt, say Israel and Jordan, these are cradles of civilization, to be along the Nile River, to discover the treasures that are there and that frankly were saved and protected by UNESCO, which UNESCO started here in the United States with Abu Simbel, with some of the original treasures that still are along the Nile, preserved exactly as they were. It's a beautiful, beautiful destination, and it is open. It'll be open this fall, so we're starting up our Egypt tours again. That's been a favorite. My daughter Colleen worked in Egypt for Zahi Hawass, so I had an opportunity to go several times and really see some of the sites that are still being uncovered in Egypt. It's just fascinating, so I would encourage everyone to take that. Other favorite trips? Well, I think we have 25 or 30 fantastic itineraries in Italy, for example. We started our European tours in 1991, soon got into riverboating, which is our fastest growing segment right now. Europe is number one for all our customers. And of course, Italy, I've been to time and time again. It's hard to choose which tour in Italy. We have Sicily, we have Tuscany, Umbria tours, we have Rome, Florence, Venice, of course. We have beautiful small ship cruises throughout the Mediterranean. We have special trips just of Capri and Amalfi Coast. But the number one seller, and one that I helped design and one that's always been close to my heart and to our guests, is what's called Classic Italy. It's just a classic, beautiful tour, which includes the main sites as well as off the beaten track, some of the beautiful small boutique hotels in Tuscany and Umbria. And if you want to go and do Italy at one time and see some of the best and the finest hotels and the cultural experiences that are very special, Classic Italy, easy one to remember.
And the food.
Oh,
my
fantastic.
God. You got me excited. Very interesting. We've talked about the future of travel, what it's going to look like. We've talked about places all over the world, but you always come back to Westport. Really, really, really interesting. And I agree with you. I don't know that there are a lot of places that people who grew up there feel so strongly about, but there's something about this place that brings people here. They go around the world, they travel on their own, they travel with Tauck or a competitor, and they bring all those experiences back here, and it's a unique place.
And when you raise children here, and I had the opportunity to do that both here in Westport and living in Weston for a while, the draw, whether you were in Wilton or Weston, both great communities, always seem to come back to Westport. And I like seeing, not only for myself, but for our friends and parents, that our kids have, the parents that you meet during the times that your kids are in the school system here. These kids, like so many communities, they leave. They go to New York City. They go around the world. My daughter's lived in a number of different places. And you know what's happening now as it has before? They're coming back and they're having their children here. And that's been really nice for me to see. I can give you countless names of people in town whose now adult children have come back and whose little babies and toddlers are in the same daycares that we were in and enjoying the same opportunities that they have. places like Wakeman Town Farm and new places that have sprung up and bring families together have been, really nice to see and very intergenerational, and that's what we're all about too.
That will be our next podcast at some point, people who come back, as
Good.
you did. Robin Tauck, it's been fascinating. I've learned a lot, and anything I didn't ask that you wanted to get across?
No, I just wanted to say thank you, Dan. I know you've been part of learning about the Tauck travel history for many years, and to all our audience out there in Westport, we hope you will come and travel with us. And it's been fun for a half an hour to take you a little bit around the world, and to know that our travel is very much open now. All of our trips in the United States and Europe, and it's cautious, it's different. We're going to be healthy and safe and secure, and respect the local communities as we get out and explore the world again. So
Awesome.
thank you for having me.
Thanks, Robin. And thank you all for watching.